Today on September 8th, a letter with shocking news about your inheritance is about to arrive. You won't believe who sent it. Open it quickly. Archangel Michael says the day has been marked for you since before you could remember, sealed into the quiet of calendars and the hush of drawers where secret papers sleep. The air itself carries a message, a soft pressure at the edge of your chest that knows something is traveling through the city toward your door. A courier moves like a drawn line between destinies, and the line ends at your name. He says the hour chose you, not the other way around, and it has the feel of a key turning in a lock you did not know you own. He says the past had been arranging chairs for you in rooms you haven't stepped into yet. Setting out clean linen, setting out light. He says to be calm, to listen, to stand like a lighthouse as the sea brings you what was always yours. Here's a letter coming, wrapped in a brown paper hush, tied with a seam of twine that looks more ceremonial than practical. The twine remembers older hands. The paper smells faintly of old cedar and warm dust, the kind that follows a librarian to sleep. The envelope carries a crest you have never seen, yet your bones recognize it like a lullaby, a compass rose, a sprig of laurel, 3 little ticks along the margin that look like someone counting the years. A damp circle where wax once rested darkly blooms in the corner, as if time itself tried to sign it. Your name is written in a hand that tilts forward, as if the writer was trying to hurry you into your future. Archangel Mitchell says, this is the day doors act like feathers, weightless if you push with intention. He says there are signatures that invite themselves into your life long after the ink dries, and they carry their own weather. He says you have been brave enough to keep going when no one clapped, and now the applause is arriving inside an envelope. A desk somewhere far away held this letter for months, maybe years, guarded by a clerk who kept polishing a brass nameplate as if shining the future would bring it closer. At the end of one hallway, a wall plot ticked like a gentle metronome for patience. At the other end, a ledger stored your name like a seed in winter. You have felt the prelude all week, the misfiled memory that kept trying to be remembered, the dream in which a door opened by itself, the quiet blessing of finding a coin on the pavement with a year that matters most to you. You have noticed small alignments, an old photograph shifting in its frame, a call you missed by a second, a song you had forgotten starting at the exact line where you once promised yourself you'd be ready. This is what arrival sounds like before anyone knocks. When the courier finally appears, it is not dramatic, he is astonishing in its ordinariness. A soft rap, a polite hello, the pen that glides across a rectangle where you sign your name and somehow sign your life forward. The package is light, almost suspiciously so, the way truth can feel weightless right before it lands. You sit with the letter on your lap like a sleeping bird, hearing its tiny heart under the paper. For a breath or two, you do nothing. A moment deserves your stillness, a moment requests that you notice yourself. Archangel Mitchell says to open with reverence, not with fear. He says to slice through the twine as if cutting through years of disbelief. He says to remember that your hands are holy instruments of change even when they tremble. The first page is cream and clean-lined, the typography firm and old-fashioned. The words greet you by both your given name and the name you grew into when life taught you to be unbreakable. Each letter stands patiently like people waiting to tell you something important without rushing you. There's a heading, disposition of effects and intentions, followed by a name that doesn't match your family registry and yet hums inside you like a tuning fork. The name is a surname your grandmother dropped to keep herself safe. The name is a road back through all the forks where the story could have left you. The name is a compass needle unspinning, then settling true. A paragraph explains that a private trust was established years ago to hold assets, memories, and instructions until the beneficiary embodied certain qualities written into a list the founders called quiet proofs. These were not tests of credentials or wealth. They were proofs like these, that you stayed kind when mocked, that you kept a promise when the world forgot it, that you told the truth on the day it would have been cheaper to be silent. Another section notes events the trust observed by proxy through witnesses and inscriptions, a librarian's gratitude recorded in a margin, a neighbor's thank you written on a holiday card you never opened, a receipt for a toy you bought and slipped without your name into a drive box in winter, the trust hand beamed collecting evidence of your spirit, the way night collects stars. Archangel Mitchell says you have been auditioning for your own destiny without realizing it. And the role has always been yours. He says legacy is a mirror you polish with your days. He says humility polishes faster than pride. Tucked behind the formal page waits a letter on thin stationery, the edges soft as if handled whenever missing someone hurt the most. A faint scent rises, old rosewater, maybe, or the ghost of it. The handwriting trembles at first, then steadies in its care. Beloved, it begins without preface. I left without telling you the whole map because some roads are safer when discovered by feet that have learned to heal themselves. I chose a watcher for you in the world of papers, and he kept my instruction to wait until you grew into the person whose eyes could read this without breaking. The letter continues. You won't believe who sent this, and that disbelief will be a small mercy because the truth will swell and then soften you. I am the hand behind this envelope, though my hands have long since been folded in delight. I am the voice that wrote the quiet proofs list. I am the one who kept your first drawing in a box marked for courage. It is signed in the old name your grandmother shrugged off when danger came, the name you never heard spoken aloud because everyone who knew it learned silence is protection. It is signed in the same tilt-forward script as your envelope. He is the sender, a woman who taught herself to disappear so that you could learn to appear. There is a key taped to the page, the tape gone yellow and tired, still stubbornly useful. Below it, an address for a place outside your city where lilacs climb a chain-link fence like children who don't know about boundaries yet, a house number that repeats digits meaningful to you in ways no one would guess, a note, the front door sticks, speak to it kindly. Archangel Mitchell says your inheritance is not a single thing but a constellation, property, yes, but also instructions for how not to let property own you, money, yes, but also a ledger of the debt already cancelled by grace, objects, yes, but also the understanding that objects are vessels for love, not proof of it. He says you are about to become a steward in a world that confuses stewardship with display. He says take a breath and choose your pace. A folded blueprint shows the layout of rooms you have never walked, a sunroom that faces east to catch mornings, a kitchen that chooses wide counters and windows, a small attic with slanted ceilings where someone wrote dates into the wood like anchors. On the back, in pencil, your grandmother has drawn a line of excess in the hallway where the light falls just so at 3:13 in the afternoon. She writes, stand here to remember, stand there to forgive. A second envelope hides in the folder, smaller, with your name again but this time with a different middle initial, the one your mother wanted to give you and then did for reasons that only made sense to her heart. Inside, a pair of brass cufflinks shaped like commas, as if even endings in this family ask permission first. Alongside them, a locket with hair the color of your memory of summer. There is a legal schedule of assets, but it reads like a family tree pretending to be math, a trust account with a balance that would have seemed like fantasy when you were measuring groceries down to the smallest bill. A list of paintings by an artist whose work you once paused over in a museum without quite knowing why you felt claimed by it. A certificate granting you the right to a small patch of land where, long ago, someone planted pear trees that learned patience and sweetness the hard way, Archangel Mitchell says. Accept with courage, organize with clarity, and let yourself be helped. He says this is a tide rising, do not try to stop the moon from pulling it. He says your task is to choose what this means rather than let it choose you. There are instructions written in plain language, almost tender in their practicality. Call this person first, she knows the history of the walls. Do not sell anything in the first 6 months, grieving and rejoicing both make poor real estate agents. Eat at the kitchen table before you bring in movers. Let the house taste your laughter, your breath, the sound of your fork against the plate. Walk the rooms barefoot, listen for where the floorboards insist on telling you stories. Then a little paragraph that looks like poetry pretending to be legal advice. The fortune cannot outpace the soul and still feel like fortune. You are richer when you are truest. If money makes you small, spend it on relief. If money makes you loud, invest in silence. The letter includes a list of names, some familiar, some forgotten, some new as birdsome, next to each, a word like a charm. My. Lantern, root barber. Mr. Das, hinge. These are the people who guarded parts of the story until now. These are the lives the inheritance wants to touch besides yours. A small leather notebook falls out of the folder when you lift it, as if surprised to be free at last. On the first page, a sentence. This is not a story about possession, this is a story about belonging. On the second, the house will ask for music. Give it the songs that grew you. On the third, when in doubt, put your hands into dough and bring something warm out of the oven. Archangel Mitchell says that wealth without ritual becomes noise. He says to mark the day you turn the key by lighting a candle and learning one thing about the history of that street you never knew. He says to invite goodness in with the plain theatrics of sweeping a threshold. A photograph waits beneath the notebook, wrapped in tissue. It shows your grandmother younger than you've ever seen her, standing beside a bicycle with a ribbon tied around the handlebars. She looks like a person who learned how to invent the future without permission. On the back, bought with tips, wrote into the next life. Then, the most tensile page, a confession from the person you least expected to protect you, the relative who once spoke against you in a room full of opinions, and now sends a written apology through time. They admit they were afraid of your light, that they tried to control what they could not understand. They explain they served as the misdirection that kept danger looking the wrong way while the quiet trust matured. Your signature lands like a long exhale after years of holding the breath. Archangel Mitchell says redemption is an inheritance. 2. He says not every apology requires you to reopen every wound. Some apologies are bridges you are free to cross at your tempo. He says grace is heavy enough to be felt, light enough to be carried. At the bottom of the letter, a line invites you to bring what is best in you to what is now most possible around you. Consider creating a scholarship in the name of someone who taught you to keep going. Consider paying forward the grocery bill you once did not know how to meet. Consider setting aside a quiet fund for your own wonder, books, travel, a class that teaches your hands to make something beautiful out of ordinary materials. There is also a warning, clear without drama. People will appear because doors open both ways. Some will come as if they smell bread cooling on a windowsill, others will come as if they are checking that the lock still works. You do not need to explain your life to everyone. You are allowed to be careful and open at the same time. A soft map accompanies the papers, with a route highlighted in pencil from your egress to the house. The line prefers back roads that pass a lake that mirrors the sky like a vow. At the top right corner, your grandmother has sketched a tiny coffee cup. Beneath it, "Stop here." The woman behind the counter knows your story better than you do. Archangel Mitchell says the next 72 hours are for attunement, not announcements. He says let news gather in you like light before dawn. He says when the right words come, they will arrive with the right listeners. You fold the papers slowly, the way you fold a shirt that once belonged to someone you love. The key is heavy now, or perhaps you have learned how to feel it. The room seems altered, as if the walls have pushed back to make room for what is entering your life. Your phone buzzes with nothing urgent, the world continues, but a quiet drum in your chest keeps a new time. You have choices, and they look like simple things. Pick up a bag, a bottle of water, the sweater whose sleeves know your elbows best. Lock the door behind you with a click that sounds like consent. The city outside bears no sign that your life has just gathered itself differently. Cars travel, trees hold birds. A child drops a glove and a stranger returns it with a smile. Still, you know, the road knows. Even the clouds seem to move with intention, as if shepherded by a promise. The drive is not long, long is a word for waiting without hope. This is not that. This is movement adorned with recognition. Street after street, you ride past the lives you used to rehearse into the one that asked for your name directly. When you arrive, the house rests behind a fence painted years ago by a hand that hummed while working. The lilacs have finished blooming, but the leaves were the shape of their perfume. The front door looks like it remembers every palm that ever pushed it open. And it greets your touch like a friend who never doubted you'd return. The door sticks. You speak to it kindly, he yields. Inside, thus motes turn in the air like slow applause. Light pours itself down the hallway the way generosity finds a reason. The rooms breathe. The very floorboards seem to reintroduce themselves, murmuring as they settle. Yes, yes, yes. On the kitchen counter sits a tin box painted with strawberries. You open it and find recipe cards written in the combined dialect of 3 generations, measurements that mean until it looks right, instructions that lean on trust, bake until the house smells like childhood. Dipped to the lid, a small, faded photograph of a cake with your first initial piped in frosting. The caption reads, "First Triumph." A stack of letters wrapped with ribbon ties the years together. They are addressed to you at every age you have ever been, dated on days when you almost gave up and didn't. Dear you at 14, you are not too much. Dear you at 23, don't negotiate against yourself. Dear you yesterday, thank you for staying. You will read them when silence can be a soft chair. Archangel Mitchell says a home like this is a chapel for ordinary miracles. He says learn its creaks the way you learned a loved one's laugh. He says your inheritance wants to introduce you to a version of yourself who trusts ease without apology. In the back room sits a desk the color of old conversation. In its drawer, you find a sealed envelope labeled First Decision. You open it because today is August 13th, because the hour is ripe, because the person you have become knows how to do hard and graceful things. Inside, a simple, dignified donation certificate already filled out to fund a set of library cards for children whose parents can't yet show proof of address. A line waiting for your signature shines. You sign, not because you owe but because you can. You sign because your grandmother taught you in absence what presence required. You sign because generosity is a language you speak fluently even when you are tired. The house exhales. You do too. Outside, the afternoon leans toward a golden stretch of time where everything looks briefly like a photograph taken by someone who loves everything they see. You stand in the hallway where the light crosses the floor exactly as the pencil excess promised. You place your hand on the wall and feel a pulse that might be yours, might be the house's, might be both. There is more to discover, of course, a trunk in the attic with your great-grandfather's compass and a letter from a voyage he ended early to return to the person he was becoming. A tin of buttons that proves the women in your line always had a contingency plan. A music box that only plays when you remember to wind it and then plays a tune that always knew your name. Archangel Mitchell says the letter did not make you deserving. It confirmed what life already knew. He says you are walking a bridge your ancestors built with their stubborn hope. He says you do not need to perform worthiness today. You only need to practice it with the gentle certainty that made this day possible. By evening, the house has learned your footsteps. By evening, you have learned how the kitchen window catches the last light like a bull. You lean there, both hands on the counter, both eyes wider than they have been in months. You think of the clerk who polished the brass nimbly. You think of the courier who moved like a drawn line. You think of the relative who apologized on paper and the neighbor who called you harbor even when you wanted to be a storm. The letter has done its work and continues to do it, the way rain doesn't ask to be remembered by the lake it fills. The inheritance has entered your life like a door that opens both inward and outward. You are free to step through in both directions, into memory, into tomorrow. There will be days ahead when your old scarcity tries to speak loudly. There will be invitations you decline with kindness and boundaries you draw with smiles. There will be moments of astonishment so bright you will have to sit down. There will be a new, quiet strength that becomes your signature, recognizable even at a distance. Archangel Mitchell says to end this day with gratitude that does not need an audience and courage that does not require armor. He says fold the papers, place the key in its dish, name the rooms out loud as if calling them into a circle. He says sleep as if the bed knows your spine's story and it does. Tonight you will dream simpler, not smaller, simpler, like rivers that remember the ocean without fuss. Tomorrow you will bring coffee to the porch and read the letters addressed to every age you have ever been. In those pages you will meet yourself again and again, each meeting a reunion, each reunion a gentle argument for how far love can carry a life when it is patient, stubborn, and unafraid. And when anyone asks you, months from now, how it felt the moment the envelope arrived on August 13th, you will say it felt like being recognized by a room, like being held by a house, like being written into a story that always meant to include you. You will say it felt like a key in the light. You will say it felt inevitable and miraculous at once. The letter's crest has already found a place in your memory, and the quiet proofs are etched into your days. You are the beneficiary of more than assets. You are the beneficiary of a faith someone placed in you when you couldn't yet afford your own. The inheritance is a responsibility only in the way sunlight is. Too beautiful to waste, too generous to hoard, too alive to ignore. So step into it, range your life around what matters. Let generosity be a habit and not a headline. Create rituals for rival, store laughter in jars. Learn which windows insist on being opened in rain. Carry Kai for small miracles, keep a coat on the hook by the door that fits a friend. Archangel Mitchell says the story is not finished, but the first chapter is closed with grace. He says your hands are now the hands that fold the next letters. He says somewhere far away, a clerk sets down a pen and smiles, and a wall clock takes a breath between ticks, and the world, in a barely audible way, nods. If you wish to express your support further, you have the option to give super thanks with contributions of up to $1.20. You place the signed certificate back into its envelope and set it on the desk like a small lighthouse. The room brightens in a way that's hard to explain, as if the house were proud of you. Somewhere outside, a train passes and the sound threads through the walls like a promise that things are moving. You open the next drawer and find a slim bundle wrapped in newspaper. Inside, there's a second, smaller key on a red thread. A note is tied to it for the box that holds the voice. Beneath the key, a cassette tape in a clear plastic case. The label written in your grandmother's careful hand, for when the day arrives, the tape player is on a shelf by the window, dusty, but ready. You wipe it with your sleeve, press the cassette in, and sit. The speakers crackle, then warm, your voice fills the room soft, steady, close. She greets you by your childhood nickname and then by the name you claim now. As if to bless the full line between both. She tells you the story of the house with no flourishes, only facts that sound like love. She explains how she saved, how she trusted, how she wrote down the quiet proofs one by one. She says she knew the world might try to convince you to be smaller, so she chose to leave you a place that keeps reminding you of your size. Archangel Mitchell says to let yourself hear every word twice, once with your ears and once with your life. He says the voice of an ancestor returning like this is not a ghost, it is a guide. He says to notice how your shoulders lower when you feel accompanied. The recording mentions 3 people by name: Maya, Rohit, and Mr. Das, and then a place, Silvius. You recognize the sketched coffee cup on the map. They'll know what to do next, your grandmother says, go gently. Pay for someone else's coffee if you can. You pause the tape, slide it back into the case and pocket the small key. The house is reluctant to let you go. You can feel the gentle drag of belonging at your back. Still, it releases you with a hush of approval when you lock the door. At Silvius, bell chimes follow you in like little birds. The woman behind the counter has the kind of face people trust without thinking about it. When you say your name, her eyes warm, and she turns to pour a cup before you can order, as if this scene was rehearsed. Been waiting for you, she says, not in the dramatic way of muais, but as if stating the weather. She slides the coffee across, then reaches under the counter to bring out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with baker's string. From Maya she explains, lantern, yes. She lights the first room. You take a table near the window. Inside the parcel, a journal with a cloth cover and a leather bookmark shaped like a leaf. On the first page, an introduction written in a different hand than your grandmother's, rounder, younger. Blow, love, it begins. I'm Maya. Your grandmother taught me to write what I see and not to add sugar unless the medicine is bitter. Here is what I saw while we waited for you. There are careful notes about the house, the spot where rain tries to sneak in under the eaves. The rosebush that blooms twice if you remember to speak to it, the neighbor who keeps spare light bulbs for everyone on the block. There are also names. People who showed up over the years with stories that needed a listener or skills that needed sharing, people your inheritance already plans to bless. Folded into the journal. Receipt for 5 cups of coffee with a line drawn through the amount and the word covered, Maya's handwriting again. Start here. You look up and see a young woman at the counter counting coins, then putting 2 back into her pocket so she can leave enough to pay. Without making a show of it, you catch Sylvia's eye and nod. She nods back. The small beginning feels right. Archangel Mitchell says generosity is the first key that turns all other locks. He says start small before you start big and make sure you can hear your own heart while money moves. He says what you practice in private becomes your public strength. Rohit arrives as you're reading, a man whose presence makes the room feel anchored. He introduces himself and his smile reaches his eyes. Harbor, he says, tapping his chest and then nodding toward you, Yugur to Yugur. You talk for a while about the house, about the list of quiet proofs, about how strange it is when life finally agrees out loud with what you suspected quietly. He tells you what he knows about the trust. It was designed to protect you from haste, to keep you from becoming a cautionary tale about sudden fortune. It opens in stages, guided by people who watched over the years, each one handing you something that fits the next door. Today is stage 1, he says. The house avoids his circle. He sketches a triangle on a napkin and writes place, story, people. Beneath it he writes steadiness, then he slides the napkin to you. Everything else grows from this. Mr. Das meets you at the house later that afternoon. He checks the hinges and smiles as if they are old colleagues. He shows you the trick to the front door, push up gently, then forward with respect. Doors behave better when you behave better, he says, half joking and wholly true. He walks through each room with the care of a curator and the practicality of someone who has fixed more roofs than he can count. From his bag, he brings out a tin of identical screws, a tiny jar of oil, and a cloth that has somehow stayed clean through years of work. He says the house has a good frame, a better soul, and a few urgent needs. He explains a plan for repairing what time has leaned on too hard, starting with the small things that will make your days easy: door latch, loose tile, the window that refuses to stay open. You ask about the tiny key on the red thread, and he nods. Back, he says. Box that holds the voice, and I suspect something else. He offers to come with you as a witness, if you'd like. You say yes without second guessing. Some thresholds are sweeter crossed with company. Archangel Mitchell says companionship is part of your inheritance. He says the myth of doing it all alone is a thief. He says the right helpers turn heavy into possible. At the bank, the manager recognizes your grandmother's name and straightens in a way that reveals respect, not just policy. Papers are signed, boxes retrieved, counters cleared of paperclips as if for a ceremony. The small key slides into a lock with a satisfying click that sounds like a sentence finishing itself. Inside the box, a second cassette, a manila envelope, and a folded piece of fabric that you unfold into a hand-stitched banner. It reads, "Home is where we choose to keep our promises." The letters are uneven in the way that makes handmade things perfect. The cassette is shorter. Your grandmother's voice again, but this time she laughs before she speaks, a sound that brings water to your eyes without your permission. "If you're listening to this, then you listened to the first thing too," she said, teasing. "Good. Now here's what you need to know about the money." She doesn't mince words. She tells you what's there and what's not, where it lives and what it's for. She repeats that you shouldn't sell anything for 6 months unless the house itself asks you to, in a voice you can't ignore. She suggests you hire a calm accountant and an honest lawyer, and then gives you their names. If they retire, she adds, hire whomever they recommend. The manila envelope contains 3 smaller envelopes, a date, 1 month, 6 months, 1 year. You leave them sealed. Not everything needs to happen today. The bank manager gives you a quiet room to sit with these things, and you sit, letting time move around you like a warm river. Archangel Mitchell says patience is a kind of courage. He says waiting on purpose turns the future into an ally. He says there is no price for sprinting past wisdom. Back at the house, you make a simple dinner from what you picked up on the way: bread, olives, tomatoes, cheese. You eat at the kitchen table as instructed, listening to the way silverware sounds in this room. You pour water into a glass and it tastes like agreement. You take a photo of the table without any plan to share it. It is enough that you witnessed it. Afterward, you explore the attic. The trunk at the center opens with a creak that sounds like an old song restarting. Inside, the compass you expected, a stack of postcards from places you haven't seen yet, and a ledger, on the cover, written in pencil, "Mercy, Tally." The ledger is not a list of debts owed to your family. It is a record of debts your family forgave, names of people who borrowed and could not repay. Small amounts that stretch bitter than they should have, notes in the margin like job loss, baby born, sick mother. Each line ends with a small stamp of a star and the word cleared. You sit on the attic floor with the ledger open on your knees and feel your chest rise and fall like a tide. This is the legacy you didn't know to ask for. To be descended from people who turned scarcity into softness. To have a template for the kind of rich you want to be. Archangel Mitchell says this is the part of the inheritance that will save you from the worst versions of wealth. He says memorize the feeling in your body right now. He says come back to it when the world tries to sell you a different story. You sleep in the house that night on a Macker's Mr. Doss found in the spare room, clean and serviceable, with sheets that smell faintly of sun-dried cotton. The moon pushes light across the floor and it looks like the ocean entered blithely to bless the room. You sleep like someone whose name was called gently and correctly. Morning has a different texture here. The air is thinner like it hath been filtered through leaves. You make coffee and take it to the porch. A neighbor waves. A cat inspects the boundary between your yard and the world and finds it acceptable. You bring out the journal and the ledger and a pen. You write the date August 13th and then a line. Day 1. Steady. You list 3 things to do and 4 things to wait on. You write call accountant, call lawyer, call mother. You write wait on selling, wait on telling everybody. Wait on panic, wait on new furniture. Mid-morning, Meyer arrives with a tote bag and a laugh you'd know anywhere after a single meeting. She brings bread wrapped in cloth and a potted herb for the kitchen windowsill. The plant is time, which feels like a wink from the universe you can't ignore. You spend the afternoon labeling boxes for what will be stored, what will be used, what will be offered to people who will love these things the way your family loved them. Meyer tells you stories about your grandmother you've never heard: the day she fixed her own bicycle chain in a dress, the time she sent a pie to a man who had been cruel because she decided he must be starving for sweetness. You share the tape with Meyer and she listens with her hand over her mouth, eyes bright. She tells you about the quiet proofs in her own words, how your grandmother wanted the trust to open to someone who had learned to remain kind when it wasn't fashionable, who had learned to become sturdy without becoming hard. She knew it would be you, Meyer says. She just didn't know when. Archangel Mitchell says let yourself be loved by the long work other people did. He says this is not charity. This is community. He says your gratitude can be active and quiet at once. In the early evening, Rohit returns with folders and a calm, practical energy. He walks you through timelines and introduces the idea of a family meeting: small, intentional, and guided. He suggests inviting the relative who sent the apology if you feel ready. Reconciliation is a door, not a demand, he says. You choose when and whether to open it. You nod and feel a soft strength settle into place. You are not the person who needs to prove anything. You are the person who can decide how to hold everything. Before he leaves, Rohit opens the manila envelope labeled 1 month and glances at the first instruction. He smiles. Good, he says, tucking it back. It's about rhythm. He doesn't tell you the details and you don't ask. Not every good thing needs to be named in advance to be true. Night 2 in the house is different than night 1. The excitement folds into a deeper quiet. You bake something simple from the recipe cards: bread that fills the rooms with a smell that makes everything feel possible. You call your mother. The conversation is careful and then honest and then warm. He cries a little. You do too. The past softens a degree, like butter left on the counter. In the days that follow, the house and the life inside it begin to braid. Small routines click into place: keys in a dish by the door, shoes lined by the mat, a calendar on the fridge with 3 circles drawn around rest. You meet the neighbor with the light bulbs. You insist you take 2 just in case. You return 1 the next day with cookies. You set up a desk in the sunroom facing east. On the wall above it, you hang the banner from the bank box. Home is where we choose to keep our promises. It looks exactly right there. You find that your promises are not just to other people. They are to yourself, to the part of you that stayed soft, to the part of you that kept going. Archangel Mitchell says the most important wealth you hold now is your discernment. He says you know what yes feels like in your bones and what no feels like in your lungs. He says it's safe to trust yourself. One afternoon, Sylvie stops by with 2 cups balanced in one hand and news in the other. Someone left a note at the cafe addressed to you. She passes it over, and you recognize the tilt-forward script immediately. Your grandmother again, in a note dated years ago and labeled "Deliver on day 3." It's short. By now, you've found a rhythm, she writes. Soon, you'll be asked to pick up speed. No, to depth. Where others rush, you woot. Where others grasp, you give. There will be invitations that glitter and invitations that glow. Choose the glow. You laugh and cry at the same time because you have already turned down 2 shiny invitations that didn't feel right and said yes to one small thing that did. You tell Sylvie it, who grins. You're doing it, she says. You're making the inheritance into a life. Week 1 ends with a small dinner in the kitchen. Maya, Rohit, Mr. Das, and you. You share food, stories, the first official list of repairs and the first unofficial list of dreams. No one tries to rush the moment. No one reaches for anything that isn't theirs. The room holds your laughter like a bowl holds fruit. Later, after the dishes are done and the door clicks shut behind the last guest, you sit on the floor where the light leaves its last stripes. You take out the ledger. You add a line, coffee of 5 cups. Glur. You add another, grocery bill, left at the register for the family behind me. Glur. You add a third line with no $sign, self-doubt. Not gone, but quieter. Odin, Archangel Mitchell says keep a second ledger for what grows. Patience. Trust, ease. Skill. Joy, he says count those the way the world counts money and watch what answers. He says this is how you stay human while you become abundant. On the morning of day 10, you visit the pear trees with Mr. Das. They're sturdy and hurrying generously ready. He shows you how to tell when a pear prefers the hand to the branch and you learn the feel of readiness, not force, not delay. You bring 3 home, leave 2 on the neighbor's step and eat 1 standing in the hallway where the light draws its excess. It tastes like patience fulfilled. There will be documents to sign and meetings to schedule and responsibilities to shoulder. There will be boundaries to draw with people who confuse your kindness for access. There will be moments where the old fear returns and tries to narrate. But now you know which voice to listen to and which to thank and release. You write to the relative who apologized. Your note is generous and measured. You do not open the door all the way. You do not slam it shut, you open it just enough to let the apology become a seed. We will see what grows. You write. Thank you for planning. In the second week, you meet the accountant and the lawyer your grandmother named. They are as calm as she promised. They explain things without making you feel small. They ask what matters to you and take notes like the answer is the map. When you leave you feel not just informed but seen. Archangel Mitchell says this is what wise help feels like, steady, clear, pace to your breathing. He says you don't owe anyone a performance of wealth. He says your job is to live the truest version of this story so that the story can keep living after you. 1 month will arrive soon and with it the first sealed envelope waiting to be opened. You don't dread it, you don't chase it. You let time do its work. Meanwhile, you plant herbs in the kitchen window, fix the loose tile with Mr. Das and learn the names of 2 more neighbors. You keep the journal. You keep the ledger, you keep your promises. And sometimes, in the early evening, you press play on the cassette again, not because you need instructions now but because you like her voice in the room. It mixes with the smell of something baking and the low sound of traffic and the quiet beat of your heart. the house seems to lean closer, as if trying to hear the stories you'll tell next. Archangel Mitchell says the letter was the beginning, not the whole. He says every good beginning deserves a middle that is cared for and an ending that is chosen. He says you are the author and the witness and the beneficiary all at once. This is how the days unfold, with steadiness and surprise, with work and ease, with private joys that do not need an audience. The inheritance becomes less a southern event and more a daily practice. You become less a person who receives something and more a person who became someone through receiving it well. When the first month ends, you will open the envelope. When 6 months pass, you will open the next. When a year has taught you everything this year can, you will open the last. And in between, you will keep living in a way that answers the question your life asks now. What will you do with what you have been trusted to hold? You will keep the house alive with viziers who leave lighter than they arrive. You will choose projects that add good to the world without subtracting you from yourself. You will decide again and again that depth beats speed, that glow beats glitter, that generosity beats display. And whenever doubt tries to draw circles around you, you will look at the banner above your desk, at the ledger on your shelf, at the excess on the floor where the light insists on appearing, and you will remember, you are at home in a story that keeps its promises, you are at home in a future that honors its past. You are at home. A morning of the 30th day doesn't shout, it arrives like a letter sliding under the door. You brew coffee, steady as a metronome, and place the envelope marked 1 month in the light where the excess crossed the floor. Your breath finds a pace you trust, and the paper opens without a single protest. Inside is a single page and a small, linen card. The page is headed, "The Table of Four." Beneath it, your grandmother's hand has written 4 names with 4 roles: mentor, neighbor, stranger, self. Invite 1 person who steadied you, 1 who lives on your street, 1 you've never met but are guided to through Sylvie, and yourself, the note says. Eat together, speak plainly, and write the first pledge for this inheritance on the linen card. At the bottom, a simple instruction: keep the card in the kitchen where heat makes promises real. Archangel Mitchell says beginnings favor circles. He says when people share bread, truth lands softer and sticks longer. He says fortune loses its sharp edges when served from a common table. By late afternoon, the table is set with ordinary plates that look right in every era. Mai brings roasted vegetables, Ravid brings a printout of timelines and a laugh that calms clocks, and Sylvie arrives with a stranger named Faray whose poetry has been paying the bills only sometimes. You bring a loaf you made from a card that reads "Bake until the house smells like childhood." You talk about the house and the quiet proofs, passing the journal for everyone to sign on the inside cover. Ravid sketches a slow arc on a scrap of paper and labels it sustainability, and Mai adds a tiny lantern at the midpoint. Faray speaks about the way a single small grant can turn a month from brittle to breathable. When the plates are mostly breadcrumbs in memory, you place the linen card in the middle. You all write with 1 pen, each line leaning toward the next like chairs do when company lingers. The pledge reads, "We will let glow outrank glitter. We will measure wealth in mercy and mornings. We will keep a ledger where generosity is the headline." Archangel Mitchell says a pledge is a door you agree to walk through every day. He says say it softly, then say it with your choices. He says the house heard you. Inside the envelope is also a second sheet practical as a toolbox. Dree Pools the heading says. TRD today. 10% to mercy, tally direct relief where the need is clear, 10% to wonder books, classes, travel that enlarges the soul. 10% to repair home health and the people who maintain both. Save, invest, and breathe with the rest. You and Ravit set up the transfers that night with the patient clack of keyboard keys that somehow feels ceremonial. Sylvia suggests the first mercy. Tally act rent support for a family she knows who fell through a crack no one designed but that still exists. Mine nominates wonder tuition for a young woman in the neighborhood who wants to learn carpentry because she's tired of being told she can't. The house changes almost imperceptibly as these decisions settled in. The front door's stick softens another degree. Mr. Doss claims it's oil and weather, but you hear more than mechanics in the glide. The hallway light seems thicker, as if the air decided to participate in belonging. On the 7th week an envelope arrives with a heavy logo and words dressed like compliments but stitched with urgency. A developer wants to unlock the value of your corner to elevate the neighborhood to honor legacy with modernity. They offer numbers big enough to make eyes blink. You read the letter at the kitchen table and feel the old scarcity clear its throat. You thank it for caring and show it the ledger where fear is recorded without interest. You slide the letter under the stack that says review solely. Archangel Mitchell says the first big offer is a test of tempo. He says not every door is for you and even fewer are for right now. He says decline with grace before you have to refuse with fire. You draft a reply that is firm and kind. Thank you for your interest, you write. At this time, stewardship outranks sale. We wish you well. Roik reads it, smiles and adds a single word at the end, warmly. That same afternoon, the relative who wrote the apology sends a message asking if they may see the house. Your chest remembers being a room where shouting live it and then remembers the ledger of clear debts. You reply the next morning, after sleeping on softness, with a measured yes. They arrive with a paper bag of fruit from the market and an awkwardness they refuse to hide. They bring your childhood scarf, laundered and folded, the one you thought disappeared in a move that took more than furniture. They say, I was poor in courage then, and you hear the sentence land in the house like a chair pulled out for truth to sit. You walk them through the rooms and speak in the present tense. This is the sunroom, this is where mooring collects, this is the banner. You stand together in the acts of light and say nothing for a long minute. They ask if they may write a line in the ledger and you turn the book toward them. Their handwriting shakes, but not from lack of conviction. Control, they write, released. Next to it they add, I will practice being trustworthy. You don't say you forgive them, you don't perform healing. You nod. And the nod is real. Archangel Mitchell says some bridges are built with planks of silence and nails of small, consistent acts. He says you are not required to sprint across. He says the river below is made of time and will be there tomorrow. As the 6th week leans into the 7th, you and Mr. Doss finish a row of repairs that make daily life hum. A latch that catches, a window that holds its angle, a floorboard that no longer sings a solo at midnight. He shows you how to fix the small things yourself and leaves you with a toolbox and a confidence that feels like you've been handed another key. On his way out, he taps the doorframe the way people pat a dog they've come to love. You take the Wonder Fund for a walk. You sign up for a class in archival preservation at the community college because the house keeps delivering paper memories and you want to hold them well. You order books about the history of the block and find old maps where the river curved differently, as if even water rehearses before it performs. The 1-month card gathers small grease freckles from dinners and looks more alive because of it. Visitors read the pledge and smile like they recognize themselves in it. You read it every morning as if it were the weather report for your decisions. On a stormy night that feels like a drum roll. Lightning makes silhouettes on the wall you decide you want to keep. You move a chair there to sit and think, and the house seems to softly agree with this new geography. Rain talks to the roof. The roof answers like an elder who knows the neighborhood. The next morning, Sylvia knocks with a stack of postcards someone left at the cafe, historic images of the very street you live on, all sepia and patience. On the back of one, a familiar tilt-forward hand. When 6 months arrives, choose one place from these to visit and listen for our story there. Your thumb lands on a postcard of the train depot and the picture looks like a sentence catching its breath. Archangel Mitchell says the future waits at places where roads and rails kiss. He says travel to remember, not to escape. He says you will hear your name called in the language of arrivals. Meanwhile, you begin a weekly ritual you call open house. Quiet hour. For 60 minutes, the front door stands open, the belt tied back with string, and anyone who needs a calm room to think may sit at the kitchen table and use the good pen. No questions. No forms, just air, tea, and a timer that dignifies their time. Word spreads in the useful way. A nurse from the night shift naps upright with her hands around a warm mug. A teenager drafts a letter to herself about September. A widower cop is a recipe because he wants to keep making her soup exactly the way she did. You add a gentle line to the pledge: we will be a place where thirsties know how to help. The developer writes again with bigger numbers and a fancier envelope. You forward it to the lawyer with a single question: how do I decline once? They reply with a sentence smooth as river stones. By declining completely, you issue a public not for sale that is not a performance, but a boundary. The neighborhood exhales. 2 days later, someone takes a child's drawing of your house to the fence. It has a smiling door and a dive that doesn't exist but somehow now does, in spirit. Archangel Mitchell says your no makes room for your deeper yes. He says you are practicing being the ancestor someone will thank by name. He says keep the door smiling. The day before the 6-month mark, a small package arrives addressed in a hand you don't recognize, angular, careful, exact. Inside, a brass coin stamped with the crest from your first envelope and 3 words around the rim: hold. Consider. Choose. There is no note, just a postmark from a town 2 hours away and the quiet confidence of something that knows it will be useful. You place the coin beside the 6-months envelope on the desk, light a candle, and turn off your phone. You don't open it yet. You clean the kitchen first, water the thyme, and set the table for one with the good napkin. You have learned that ritual makes openings gentler. When you finally slice the envelope open, the paper breathes with you. There are 2 pages, a small check, and a Polaroid tucked like a heartbeat between them. The Polaroid is of your grandmother on the very porch where you're sitting, a loaf in her hands, a grin that looks like a forecast of comfort. The letter is practical music again: begin the lantern fund. It says, $1,000 each month to someone whose work lights a room the world has overlooked. It lists simple criteria written in the plainest truth: no bureaucracy, no auditions, no branding, just careful attention and a phone call that starts with, "I see you, and here is what I can do." There is an instruction to visit the old train depot with the postcard in your pocket and to listen for 3 stories. Who left, who returned, who stayed. There is a quiet dare: take the person whose name you wrote beside the word hinge. You think of Mr. Doss and smile because hinges hold swinging doors in place but are themselves rarely photographed. A second page outlines the first large mercy, a one-time payment to clear medical debt for a list of names that reads like a hymn if you let it. Next to each name is the amount and a tiny asterisk where your grandmother's notes whisper. This one cried, this one laughed, this one danced in the hallway. A final line: add 2 names of your own choosing. Archangel Mitchell says some gifts must feel like thunder rolling away. He says shop doesn't have to be sharp. It can be soft and permanent. He says do this before you tell anyone you did. You use the brass coin hold, consider. Choose. Between each decision, pressing it into your palm until your thoughts flow into clarity. You call the hospital billing office and a community nonprofit and learn exactly how to erase numbers without creating noise. You choose 2 names, one from the open house guest book and one you heard about from Sylvia, and write them in careful script. Then you open the check, ready and surprised anyway. The amount is more than you expected and exactly enough to do what the letter asked and leave a cushion for the next thing you can't see yet. Your grandmother knew the math of mercy. You bicycle to the depot with Mr. Doss the next morning because the day asks for wheels and wind. The building is still used, just quieter than the old days. Pigeons hold meetings on the rafters and a vendor sells tea that tastes like mornings that haven't learned to hurry. You sit on a bench and let the postcard warm in your hand. People arrive and leave as if demonstrating the theory of time. You listen for the 3 stories like the letter asked, and they come, one in a conversation you can't help overhearing, one in Mr. Doss's memory about his first day in this city, and one in the silence between trains when even the air admits it loves departures for what they make possible. You write down what you hear and feel the hinge turn. Archangel Mitchell says travel inside a city counts as pilgrimage if the heart returns different. He says postcards are tiny portals when held with intent. He says you will know which photographs to keep by which ones keep you. Back home, the Lantern Fund makes its first call to Ferio. She answers with the voice of someone braced to be turned down and then lets out a sound you will remember whenever you need proof that money can ring like a bell. You tell her there are no speeches required, just a poem someday when she feels like it and a promise to light another lantern if she can. The ledger gets free new lines that night: debt, queered men and lit, pace, kept. You add a 4th in small script. Self-trust, accrued. You fall asleep to a ring that sounds like distant applause and a house that has learned the rhythm of your breathing. Weeks stretch, flavored with time and paint and people who start the conversation with "I heard you learn to say here is what I can do and also here is what I can't." Your no becomes a railing you hold while your yes crosses the bridge. On a clear morning in the 7th month, a final small envelope arrives without flourish, only your name and a familiar crest impressed into the flap. Inside is a short card with 4 words that feel like a baton placed in your palm: now write your letter. Archangel Mitchell says the circle expects you. He says you are the hand and the handwriting. The beneficiary and the benefactor, the voice on the tape and the person pressing play. He says begin with a heading you will be proud to sign, disposition of effects and intentions. You sit at the sunroom desk facing east, the banner above you, the ledger to your left, the postcards to your right, the coin under your thumb. You begin, not with money or things, but with the quiet proofs you want to ask of the person who will read your letter one day. Kept tenderness when tired, you write. Did the right thing slowly. Chose glow, the house is quiet and utterly awake. Outside the chime runs past with a kite like a loave d'oeil. Inside, you keep writing, steady as morning.